The letter arrived at Nathaniel Warner's ranch on a Tuesday afternoon in late September of 1882, carried by a postal rider who looked half dead from the Oklahoma heat. Nathaniel stood on the porch of his modest homestead just outside Fort Smith, Arkansas, turning the envelope over in his calloused hands, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his 32 years. Inside was a woman's careful script confirming that Miss Eleanor Lawson would arrive on the afternoon train 3 days hence, and that she looked forward to becoming his wife. He had not told her everything in his letters. How could he? How did a man explain to a stranger that his previous wife had died 2 winters ago, leaving him alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet? How did he confess that loneliness had driven him to place an advertisement in a Boston newspaper, hoping some desperate or adventurous woman might take a chance on a cattle rancher she had never met? Nathaniel folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket, feeling the weight of it against his chest like a stone. He had 3 days to prepare the house, to make it presentable for a woman who had grown up in the civilized East. 3 days to figure out how to be a husband again. The ranch sprawled across 200 acres of decent grazing land, with a sturdy house he had built with his own hands from local timber. It was not fancy, but it was solid. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen with a good iron stove. He had a barn, a chicken coop, and about 40 head of cattle that he managed with the help of his ranch hand, a grizzled former buffalo hunter named Pete Garrison. Nathaniel spent those 3 days in a frenzy of activity that made Pete shake his head and chuckle. He scrubbed the floors, washed the windows, aired out the spare bedroom, and even picked wildflowers to put in a jar on the kitchen table. He slaughtered a chicken and made sure the larder was well stocked. He trimmed his dark hair and shaved his beard down to a neat mustache. When he caught his reflection in the mirror, he barely recognized the anxious man staring back at him. "You are acting like the president is coming to visit," Pete said, watching Nathaniel polish the same window for the 3rd time. "I am bringing home a wife. A woman who is trusting me with her whole life." Pete spat tobacco juice into a tin can. "Reckon she knew what she was signing up for when she answered that advertisement. Maybe, or maybe she is just desperate enough to take a chance on anything. Either way, she will be here tomorrow. Best get some sleep." But Nathaniel did not sleep that night. He lay awake in his bed, listening to the September wind rattle the shutters, thinking about Eleanor Lawson. Her letters had been proper and measured, revealing little of her true character. She was 24 years old, the daughter of a shipping clerk who had died the previous year. She had worked as a seamstress to support herself and her younger brother, but the brother had recently married and moved west to California. She was alone in the world, she wrote, and thought a fresh start might suit her. He had written back honestly about his ranch, his cattle, his simple life. He had told her about the hard winters and hot summers, about the occasional trouble with rustlers or wolves. He had not told her about the darkness that sometimes crept over him in the evening hours, or about how much he missed having someone to talk to besides Pete and the livestock. The train pulled into Fort Smith at 2:30 in the afternoon, belching steam and cinders into the bright autumn air. Nathaniel stood on the platform in his best shirt and cleanest pants, his hat held respectfully in his hands, his heart hammering against his ribs. Passengers began to disembark, dusty and weary from their journey. He scanned each face, looking for a woman traveling alone. Then he saw her. Eleanor Lawson stepped down from the train car with the help of a porter, and Nathaniel felt his breath catch in his throat. She was small and slender, with auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple blue bonnet. Her dress was practical but well made, showing her skill with a needle. She carried a single carpet bag and looked around the platform with wide eyes that held more than a little fear. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Miss Lawson." She turned to face him, and he saw that her eyes were hazel, flecked with gold in the afternoon sunlight. Her face was pale with exhaustion and nerves, but she managed a tremulous smile. "Mr. Warner." "Yes, madam. Welcome to Fort Smith." He reached for her bag and she relinquished it gratefully. "How was your journey, Long?" Her voice was soft but clear. "I have never been so far from Boston in my life." "This is about as far from Boston as a person can get," he agreed. "I have a wagon waiting. The ranch is about an hour's ride." She nodded and allowed him to guide her toward the wagon. He helped her up onto the seat, acutely aware of how small her hand felt in his, how delicate she seemed compared to the rough world she had just entered. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. They rode in silence for the first few miles, the awkwardness between them thick as syrup. Nathaniel pointed out landmarks, the general store, the church, the saloon, trying to fill the quiet with useful information. Eleanor listened politely, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes taking in everything. "It is very different from Boston," she finally said. "I imagine so. Do you regret coming?" She turned to look at him, really look at him, and he saw intelligence in those hazel eyes. "Ask me again in a month." He found himself smiling despite his nerves. "Fair enough. Your letters made it sound like a hard life, but an honest one. I have had enough of dishonesty and pretense. I watched my mother die trying to keep up appearances we could not afford. I watched my father work himself to death for pennies. If I am going to struggle, I would rather do it somewhere real." "This is real," Nathaniel assured her. "Sometimes too real." The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward evening. Eleanor studied the house, the barn, the cattle grazing in the distance. It looked sturdy. "Built it myself, along with my father before he passed. It will keep out the weather and most critters." "Most? Scorpions sometimes get in, and snakes if you are not careful, but I will teach you what to watch for." He saw her swallow hard, but she did not complain. He pulled the wagon up to the house, and Pete emerged from the barn to help with the horses. Nathaniel made introductions, and Eleanor shook Pete's hand with the same serious courtesy she had shown Nathaniel. "Welcome, madam," Pete said, tipping his hat. "It will be nice to have some civilization around here again." Nathaniel carried her bag inside and gave her a tour of the house. She examined everything with a practical eye, running her fingers over the furniture, testing the pump at the kitchen sink, checking the quality of the stove. In the spare bedroom, she set her bag on the bed and turned to face him. "I assume this is my room." "Yes, madam. I thought you would want your privacy until we get to know each other better." She looked relieved. "Thank you. That is very considerate. We have a preacher coming out tomorrow to make things legal if that suits you. Or we can wait if you need more time." Eleanor shook her head. "Tomorrow is fine. I did not come all this way to be uncertain about my position. Once we are married, I can start learning how to be useful here." "You do not have to prove anything to me." "Perhaps not, but I need to prove something to myself." That evening, Nathaniel made dinner while Eleanor unpacked her few belongings. He put together a simple meal of fried ham, beans, and cornbread, hoping his cooking was not too far below her standards. She came to the table wearing a simpler dress, her hair still pinned up, and ate without complaint. "This is good," she said. "Hearty, ranch food, plenty of it, but not fancy." "I never cared much for fancy." She took a sip of water and looked around the room. "It gets dark here early. Sun sets around 6 this time of year. Winter is earlier still." He saw her fingers tighten on her glass, saw something flicker in her eyes, fear quick and unmistakable. "I see." After dinner, he lit the lamps around the main room while she washed the dishes. The darkness pressed against the windows, vast and complete in a way it never was in the city. He noticed Eleanor glancing toward the windows, then quickly away. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes. Just tired from the journey." "Of course. You should get some rest." She nodded and excused herself to her room. Nathaniel sat by the fire for a while, listening to the night sounds, the distant howl of coyotes, the creak of the house settling. He was about to head to his own room when he heard it, a small sound from Eleanor's room. Not quite a cry, but close. He stood outside her door, uncertain. "Miss Lawson, Eleanor, are you all right?" Silence. Then her voice, thin and strained. "I am fine, just adjusting." He hesitated, then said good night and went to his own room. But sleep did not come easily. Something was wrong, something she was not telling him, and it gnawed at him in the darkness. The preacher arrived the next afternoon, a jovial man named Reverend Michaels, who had married half the couples in the county. Pete served as one witness, and Pete's friend, a farmer named Dutch Cooper, served as the other. The ceremony was brief and simple. Nathaniel spoke his vows clearly, looking into Eleanor's eyes as he promised to honor and cherish her. Her voice wavered slightly on her vows, but she did not falter. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them man and wife, Nathaniel kissed her gently on the cheek, not wanting to presume more. Her skin was soft, and she smelled faintly of lavender. Pete and Dutch offered congratulations, and Reverend Michaels stayed for coffee and cake that Eleanor had somehow managed to bake that morning despite her exhaustion. After everyone left, the new husband and wife stood in their main room, suddenly and completely alone together. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, making everything seem warm and possible. But Nathaniel could already see the tension in Eleanor's shoulders as she glanced toward the windows, calculating how many hours of daylight remained. "Eleanor," he said gently, "what frightens you about the dark?" She went very still, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "How did you know?" "I saw it in your eyes last night. I heard you after you went to your room." She turned to face him, and he saw tears threatening to spill over. "I thought I could hide it. I thought I could manage. But the darkness here is so complete, so absolute. In Boston, there were always streetlights, always windows lit nearby. Here, there is nothing but blackness pressing in from every side. Why are you afraid?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "When I was 8 years old, my father locked me in the cellar as punishment for some small disobedience. He forgot about me for nearly 2 days. It was completely dark, not a single crack of light. I could hear rats moving in the darkness, feel things crawling on me. I screamed until my voice gave out. When he finally remembered and let me out, I could not stop shaking for a week." Nathaniel felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of a child suffering such cruelty. "That should never have happened to you." "But it did. And now I cannot bear to be in complete darkness. Even in Boston, I slept with a candle burning. I know it is foolish, wasteful. It is not foolish, and we have plenty of lamp oil." She looked at him with such hope it nearly broke his heart. "Truly, truly. I will leave a lantern burning in the main room every night. Your door can stay open so you can see the light. Whatever you need to feel safe." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You would do that, waste the oil, risk a fire. It is not a waste if it gives you peace. And I will make sure it is safe. I give you my word." Eleanor crossed the room and took his hands in hers. "Thank you, Nathaniel. You cannot know what this means to me." He squeezed her hands gently. "We are married now. Your fears are my responsibility. Your happiness is my concern. We will face this together." That night, Nathaniel set a sturdy lantern on the kitchen table, trimming the wick carefully and making sure it was positioned away from anything flammable. The warm, golden light filled the main room, pushing back the darkness. Eleanor's bedroom door stood open, and from her bed she could see the glow, a small, steady sun against the vast night. He checked on her before going to his own room. She was lying in bed, her eyes on the lantern, her face peaceful in a way he had not yet seen. "Sleep well, Eleanor." "You too, Nathaniel, and thank you again." No need for thanks between a husband and wife. Over the following weeks, they settled into the rhythms of ranch life. Eleanor proved to be a quick learner and harder worker than Nathaniel had expected. She took over the cooking and was considerably better at it than he was. She tended the vegetable garden, managed the chickens, and even helped Pete with the milking when he threw his back out. Nathaniel showed her the property, teaching her which areas were safe and which to avoid. He taught her to watch for rattlesnakes sunning themselves on rocks, to listen for the warning buzz before stepping anywhere she could not see clearly. He showed her how to ride the gentlest horse, a mare named Bess, so she could get to town if she ever needed to. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire, talking about their days, sharing stories from their different lives. Eleanor told him about growing up in Boston, about the ships in the harbor and the crowds in the streets. He told her about learning to rope cattle from his father, about the first time he saw a tornado tear across the prairie. Every night, without fail, he lit the lantern before darkness fell. He made it part of his routine, as natural as feeding the horses or banking the fire. Eleanor never asked him to do it, but her gratitude showed in small ways. The way she relaxed as soon as the lantern was lit, the way she smiled at him over dinner, the way she reached for his hand sometimes when they sat together. One evening in late October, about 6 weeks after her arrival, they sat close together on the settee, a quilt across their laps against the autumn chill. Eleanor had been mending one of his shirts but had set it aside, her hand still for once. "I never thought I could be happy this far from everything I knew," she said quietly. "But I think I might be." Nathaniel felt warmth spread through his chest. "You have worked harder than anyone I have ever known. You have earned whatever happiness you find." "It is not the work that makes me happy. Well, not only the work, it is feeling useful, feeling like I belong somewhere, like someone actually wants me here. I want you here, Eleanor, more than I can properly say." She looked up at him, and in the firelight he saw something new in her eyes. Not just gratitude or friendship, but something deeper. "I want to be here, with you." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek in his hand. She leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed. "Eleanor, I know this started as an arrangement, but it has become more than that for me. You have become more than that." "For me too," she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and gentle, and she kissed him back with a tenderness that made his heart ache. When they pulled apart, she was smiling, really smiling, and he knew that something had shifted between them, something profound and permanent. "I think," she said carefully, "that I do not need my own room anymore. If you would have me, I would be honored." That night, she came to his room, nervous but willing. He was gentle with her, patient, letting her set the pace. They came together as husband and wife, not just in law but in truth, and afterward she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat in the darkness. "The lantern is still burning," she murmured. "It will always burn as long as you need it. I love you, Nathaniel Warner." He tightened his arms around her. "I love you too, Eleanor, more than I knew I could love anyone." Winter came to Arkansas with cold rain and occasional snow. The ranch work grew harder, the days shorter. Nathaniel worked long hours trying to make sure the cattle had enough to eat, that the water did not freeze, that the barn stayed secure against the wind. Eleanor worked beside him when she could, and kept the house warm and welcoming when she could not. The lantern burned every night, a constant presence in their lives. Nathaniel had ordered extra lamp oil from town, enough to last through the winter and beyond. It became a symbol between them, a nightly reminder of his promise and her trust. One particularly bitter night in January, Nathaniel came in from checking on a sick calf to find Eleanor baking bread, the kitchen warm and fragrant. She looked up when he entered, her face flushed from the heat of the oven. "How is the calf?" "Weak but fighting. I gave her some warm mash. If she makes it through the night, she will probably be all right." Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron. "I will come check on her with you later." "You do not have to. It is bitter cold out there. We are partners in this, remember. Your struggles are my struggles." He crossed the kitchen and pulled her into his arms, not caring that his coat was cold and damp. "What did I do to deserve you? You left a lantern burning." They checked on the calf together every few hours throughout the night. By morning, the small creature was on her feet and nursing, and Nathaniel and Eleanor stumbled back to the house exhausted but triumphant. They fell into bed and slept through the morning, curled together against the cold. As winter gave way to spring, Eleanor began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first she tried to hide it, not wanting to worry Nathaniel, but he noticed her pallor, the way she gripped the edge of the table sometimes as if the room was spinning. "You need to see the doctor," he said firmly. "It is nothing, just a stomach complaint. Eleanor, please." She looked at him and saw the genuine worry in his eyes. "All right, we will go to town tomorrow." Dr. Hendricks was a kindly old man who had practiced medicine in Fort Smith for 30 years. He examined Eleanor while Nathaniel paced in the waiting room, his imagination conjuring every possible illness. When the doctor finally emerged, he was smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Warner. You are going to be a father." Nathaniel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "A father. Your wife is about 3 months along by my estimation. She is healthy and strong. Barring any complications, you should have a baby around late September or early October." Nathaniel went into the examination room where Eleanor sat on the edge of the table, her eyes bright with tears. "Did you hear?" I heard. "Eleanor, are you happy about this?" "Happy, Nathaniel, I am terrified and overjoyed and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I am happy." "Are you?" He crossed to her and took her hands. "I am more than happy. I am grateful. I am blessed. I am scared out of my mind." She laughed through her tears. "Then we are in this together, as always." The pregnancy progressed well through the spring and summer. Eleanor continued to work, though Nathaniel insisted she take on lighter tasks. Her body changed, growing round with their child, and Nathaniel found himself in awe of the miracle happening right before his eyes. He made a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving small designs into the headboard. Eleanor sewed tiny clothes, her skilled fingers creating delicate gowns and small blankets. They talked about names, about how they would raise the child, about their hopes and fears. The lantern still burned every night. If anything, Nathaniel was more careful with it now, making sure it was absolutely secure, that there was no possible way it could be knocked over or cause any harm. Eleanor's fear of the dark had not diminished with the pregnancy, but she had learned to manage it better, to trust that the light would always be there. In late September, Eleanor's pains began in the middle of the night. Nathaniel sent Pete racing to town for the midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered most of the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following afternoon. Nathaniel stayed by Eleanor's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering what comfort he could. He had never felt so helpless in his life, watching her suffer, unable to do anything to ease her pain. "The lantern," she gasped between contractions. "Make sure the lantern stays lit." "It is lit, my love. I promise you it is lit. Our baby should never know that kind of darkness, never know that kind of fear. Our baby will know only light and love, I swear it. Finally, as the sun began to set on the second day, Mrs. Patterson announced that it was time to push. Eleanor bore down with all her strength, her face red with effort, her hand crushing Nathaniel's. And then, miraculously, a baby's cry filled the room. A boy, Mrs. Patterson announced, holding up a red, squalling infant. A healthy baby boy. Nathaniel felt tears streaming down his face as Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket. She placed the infant in Eleanor's arms, and Nathaniel watched his wife gaze down at their son with wonder. "Hello, little one," Eleanor whispered. "Hello, my beautiful boy." "He is perfect," Nathaniel said, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The infant's fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him James after Nathaniel's father. The baby was healthy and loud, demanding attention at all hours. Eleanor proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Nathaniel helped as much as he could, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, changing diapers, doing anything to ease Eleanor's burden. The lantern took on new importance. When Eleanor nursed James in the night, its steady glow provided light without being harsh enough to fully wake the baby. When Nathaniel got up to check on the livestock, Eleanor and James could stay in the warm house, the lantern keeping watch over them. James grew quickly, a happy baby who smiled early and often. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything. Nathaniel built a fence around the porch to keep him safe, and Eleanor seemed to constantly be rescuing him from one adventure or another. One evening, when James was about 18 months old, Nathaniel came in from the barn to find Eleanor sitting on the floor with their son, teaching him to stack wooden blocks. The lantern burned on the table as always, casting its warm glow over the domestic scene. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, struck by the profound rightness of it all. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked, noticing his expression. "That I am the luckiest man alive, that I do not deserve this happiness, but I will spend every day trying to be worthy of it." She smiled at him, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip. "Come join us. James is getting very good at this." He sat down on the floor with them, and James immediately crawled into his lap, babbling excitedly and pointing at the blocks. Nathaniel held his son, looked at his wife, and felt a peace so complete it was almost painful. "Eleanor, do you ever regret it? Answering my advertisement, coming out here, giving up your old life?" She considered the question seriously. "I regret many things from my old life. I regret the years I spent afraid. I regret not leaving Boston sooner. But coming here, marrying you, building this life, that I will never regret. You gave me more than just a lantern burning in the darkness, Nathaniel. You gave me a home. You gave me love. You gave me a future I never dared to dream about. You gave me all of that too. I was just existing before you came. Now I am truly living." James knocked over his tower of blocks and clapped his hands in delight. Eleanor and Nathaniel laughed, and the sound filled the house with joy. The years passed in a steady rhythm of seasons and hard work and small joys. When James was 3, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. 2 years after that came another boy, Thomas, and 3 years later their youngest, a daughter named Catherine. The house that had once seemed too big and too quiet now rang with the sounds of children playing, arguing, laughing, and learning. Nathaniel expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Eleanor managed the chaos with grace and humor, teaching the children to read, to help with chores, to treat each other and the animals with kindness. Through it all, The lantern burned every night. It became part of the family routine, so ingrained that the children did not question it. They just knew that when darkness fell, Papa lit the lantern, and it stayed lit until morning. James, as the oldest, was the first to ask about it. He was about 7 years old, curious and observant like his mother. "Papa, why do we always keep the lantern burning? Everybody else just lights them when they need them." Nathaniel looked at Eleanor, who nodded slightly. They had known this conversation would come eventually. "Your mama had a bad experience with darkness when she was young," Nathaniel explained carefully. "Someone hurt her by leaving her alone in the dark for a very long time, so I promised her that she would never have to face complete darkness again. The lantern is a reminder of that promise." James thought about this seriously. "Someone hurt Mama." "Yes, but that was a long time ago, before she came here, before you were born. I am glad you keep the lantern lit, Papa. I do not want Mama to be scared." "Neither do I, son, neither do I." James ran off to play, and Eleanor came to stand beside Nathaniel. "He understands. He is a good boy. They all are. We are raising them right, teaching them that promises matter, that caring for the people you love is what makes a family strong." Nathaniel pulled her close, marveling as he always did at how perfectly she fit against him. "I love you, Eleanor Warner. I love you too." The children grew, each developing their own personality and interests. James was serious and thoughtful, already showing an aptitude for the ranch work. Rose was creative and gentle, spending hours drawing pictures and making up stories. Thomas was adventurous and fearless, constantly giving Eleanor heart attacks with his antics. Catherine, the baby, was sweet and cuddly, her father's absolute treasure. Nathaniel taught the boys everything he knew about ranching, about cattle and horses and the land. Eleanor taught the girls to sew and cook, but also made sure they could ride and rope and handle themselves in the rough country they called home. All 4 children learned to work hard, to help their neighbors, to value honesty and kindness above all else. The ranch prospered over the years. Nathaniel's careful management and hard work paid off in healthy cattle and good prices at market. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide for their children and even help neighbors who fell on hard times. Eleanor's fear of the dark never fully disappeared, but it became less debilitating over time. With Nathaniel beside her and the lantern burning faithfully, she learned to live with it rather than be controlled by it. Some nights, when Nathaniel was late coming in from the barn, she would stand at the window with the lantern behind her, a beacon calling him home. One such night, when Nathaniel was 50 years old and Eleanor 42, he trudged through knee-deep snow toward that welcoming light. A late spring blizzard had struck without warning, and he had been out securing the barn and moving cattle to shelter. He was exhausted and half frozen, his fingers numb inside his gloves. But when he saw the lantern light in the window and Eleanor's silhouette waiting for him, he felt warmth spread through his chest. After 18 years of marriage, the sight of her still made his heart beat faster. He stomped the snow off his boots and came inside to find hot coffee waiting and a fire roaring in the hearth. Eleanor helped him out of his wet coat, her hands gentle and efficient. "The children?" he asked. "All asleep. I checked on them a few minutes ago. Are the animals secure?" "As secure as I can make them. We will just have to wait out the storm." They sat together by the fire, drinking coffee and listening to the wind howl outside. The lantern burned on the table, steady and sure. "You remember the first night you lit that lantern for me?" Eleanor asked. "Of course. You had just told me about what your father did. I wanted to take away every bit of hurt you had ever felt. You did, you know. Maybe not all at once, but over time. You showed me that not all men are cruel, that some keep their promises, that love can be real and lasting." Nathaniel set down his coffee cup and took her hands. "You saved me too, Eleanor. I was drowning in loneliness and did not even know it. You brought light and life and love into this house. You gave me children and laughter and purpose. Everything good in my life flows from the day you stepped off that train." She leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the firelight dance on the walls. Outside, the storm raged, but inside they were warm and safe and together. The children grew into young adults, each carving their own path. James took over more and more of the ranch work, showing a gift for managing both animals and people. At 22, he married a sensible young woman named Anna from town, and they built a small house on the far edge of the ranch property. Rose discovered a talent for teaching and started a small school in Fort Smith, educating children whose parents could not afford fancy Eastern schools. At 20, she was courted by the new banker in town, a kind man who respected her intelligence and independence. Thomas, true to his adventurous nature, left at 18 to work on a cattle drive to Kansas. He promised to come back, and Nathaniel believed him, but Eleanor worried, as mothers do. Catherine, at 15, was still at home, helping Eleanor manage the household and dreaming of becoming a doctor, an ambition that both terrified and filled her parents with pride. Through all these changes, the lantern burned. It had become more than just a light in the darkness. It was a symbol of the Warner family, of the promises that held them together, of the love that had sustained them through hard times and good. One evening in early autumn, 50-year-old Nathaniel and 42-year-old Eleanor sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The children were all out, James and Anna at their own home, Rose at a social event in town, Thomas still on the trail, and Catherine staying overnight with a friend. "It is strange, having the house to ourselves," Eleanor said. "Strange, but not entirely unpleasant." Nathaniel reached for her hand. "It reminds me of when we were young before the children. We are not that old yet." "No, but we are not young either. My knees remind me every morning," she laughed. "Your knees are fine. You can still outwork men half your age." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade. As the first stars appeared, Nathaniel stood. "I should light the lantern." Eleanor caught his hand. "Nathaniel, wait." He looked down at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. I have been thinking lately. The children are grown, or nearly so. You have kept your promise faithfully for 18 years. Every single night, without fail, you have lit that lantern for me. And I will continue to light it for as long as you need me to." She stood and faced him. "I know you will. But I want you to know that even if you did not, I would be all right. You have given me so much strength over the years, so much love and security. The darkness does not terrify me the way it once did. Oh, I still do not like it, probably never will. But it does not have the power over me it once had." Nathaniel cupped her face in his hands. "Are you saying you do not want the lantern anymore?" "No. I am saying I do not need it anymore, not the way I once did, but I still want it because it is ours. It is part of our story, part of what makes us who we are. So please, keep lighting it. But know that you do it now not just for me, but for us, as a reminder of where we started and how far we have come." He kissed her then, deep and tender, and she kissed him back with the passion of a woman who still loved her husband as much as the day she married him. "I will always light the lantern," he promised. Always. True to his word, Nathaniel continued to light the lantern every evening. But Eleanor was right. It had transformed from a necessity into a tradition, from a solution to a fear into a celebration of their love. Thomas returned from his cattle drive with stories of adventure and a small fortune saved. He used it to buy land adjacent to the ranch and started his own herd. At 21, he married a rancher's daughter from Texas, a tough, capable woman who could ride and rope as well as any man. Catherine, against all odds and with her parents' full support, went to medical school in St. Louis. It took her 6 years, but she returned to Fort Smith as doctor. Catherine Warner, the first female doctor in the county. She never married, claiming she was married to her work, but she lived a fulfilled and purposeful life. Rose married her banker and gave Eleanor and Nathaniel their first grandchildren, twin girls who visited the ranch often and loved to hear stories about how their grandmother came to Arkansas on a train, brave enough to marry a stranger. James and Anna had 4 children of their own, and they took over the main house when Nathaniel and Eleanor decided to move into a smaller cottage on the property. Nathaniel was 62 and Eleanor 54. Their bodies were showing the wear of decades of hard work, but their spirits remained strong. James promised to maintain all the traditions his parents had established, including the lantern. Every evening, just as his father had done, he lit the lantern and placed it on the kitchen table, letting it burn through the night. His children grew up with the light, just as he had, and understood that it represented something important, something about promises and love and family. Nathaniel and Eleanor spent their later years in peaceful contentment. They had worked hard, loved deeply, and built something lasting. Their children were successful and happy. Their grandchildren were healthy and growing. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management. On a warm evening in May of 1910, 70-year-old Nathaniel and 62-year-old Eleanor sat on the porch of their cottage, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. "We have had a good life," Eleanor said softly. Nathaniel took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "The best life. I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard parts, the winters we barely survived, the droughts, the times we did not know if we would make it, not even those. They made the good times sweeter. They taught us what we were capable of, and we faced them together, which made all the difference." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so frightened when I stepped off that train. I was trying to be brave, but inside I was terrified. I thought I had made a terrible mistake." "What changed your mind? You did. The way you looked at me like I was something precious. The way you listened when I told you my fear. And the way you lit that lantern without hesitation, without making me feel foolish or weak. In that moment, I knew I had found something rare. A truly good man." Nathaniel kissed the top of her head. "You brought out whatever good was in me. Before you came, I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You woke me up. You made me want to be better, to do more, to love deeper." They watched as James came out of the main house and lit the evening lantern, setting it in the window where it could be seen across the property. The familiar golden glow appeared, a beacon in the gathering dusk. "There it is," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "Still burning after all these years." "It will burn long after we are gone," Nathaniel said. "James will pass it down to his children and they will pass it to theirs. It is part of the Warner legacy now. A legacy of light in the darkness, of promises kept, of love enduring." They sat together as night fell, wrapped in a blanket against the evening chill, watching the lantern burn in the window of the house they had built together. Around them, the sounds of family filled the air, children laughing, adults talking, the normal, beautiful chaos of a life well lived. Nathaniel lived to be 74 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1914. Eleanor was devastated by his loss but took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that continued to thrive, and in the lantern that still burned every night, a connection to the man she had loved for 32 years. She lived another 8 years, dying at 70 in the summer of 1922, surrounded by her family. Her last words were about the lantern, making James promise once more that it would always burn, that the light would never go out. James kept that promise, as did his children after him, and their children after that. The lantern became famous in the county, a symbol of the Warner family and their unshakable commitment to each other. People would drive past the ranch just to see it burning in the window, a reminder that some promises last forever, that true love endures all hardships, and that light can always push back the darkness if someone cares enough to keep it burning. The original lantern, carefully maintained and repaired over the decades, was eventually placed in a museum in Fort Smith, where it still sits today. But a replica burns every night in the window of the Warner Ranch house, tended by the latest generation of Warners, who understand that they are not just keeping a light burning. They are honoring a love story that began with a frightened woman on a train platform and a lonely cowboy willing to leave a lantern burning every night, just to give her peace. The ranch itself has grown and changed with the times, but the tradition remains constant. Every evening as the sun sets over the Arkansas landscape, someone lights the lantern. It burns through the night, a small, steady flame against the vast darkness, a promise kept across generations, a love that death itself could not diminish. And if you listen carefully on quiet nights, standing near that lantern, you might almost hear the echo of a conversation from long ago. A frightened voice confessing fear, a gentle voice making a promise, and two hearts beginning to beat as one, united by something as simple as light in the darkness, and as profound as love that lasts forever.